So, hi there guys. Today I want to talk about one of the most influential characters in the Warframe universe, and that is Ballas. Ballas was an executor in the Orokin Empire, a high-ranking member who presides over the Senate-like court. Given his toga and Roman-like appearance, we can assume the hierarchical model of the Orokin Empire was much like the Roman Empire, where there is an emperor or emperors, and underneath it there's the Senate with influential politicians like Ballas who do the day-to-day running of the empire. The Detron Crewman synthesis entry tells us that the high-ranking beings of the Orokin Empire looked different, inhuman and godlike. And of course this is what we see when we actually meet the inhuman Ballas in-game, who seems to have altered his appearance somehow. It is most likely that high-ranking Orokin were less human than the normal citizens of the Empire, hence Ballas's interesting appearance. As most high-ranking Orokin, Ballas appears to be immortal. This could be through continuity, or through some other Orokin process, and given his unusual appearance, the latter is a real possibility. Ballas is a very narcissistic individual. He destroys anyone who threatens his power, and his vanity is so important to him that his mutilation at the hand of the sentients near the end of a story truly breaks him. We aren't sure of his early life, nor exactly how he became an executor, but we have plenty of anecdotes from his colourful career. He was an extremely influential member of the Orokin ruling class. The Detron Crewman synthesis tells us that he was stationed in a cosy position on Mars, as per the quote that's on screen now. This quote also suggests that he was detached from the deterioration of the Empire that they were experiencing on Earth, as he was in a cosy position on Mars. The Detron Crewman synthesis also showcases a trial in which Ballas presided over with other executors, and it shows he was clearly opposed to the idea of allowing the creation of the sentients and then using them to colonize the Tau, believing them to be dangerous. The Orokin Empire had grown too large too fast, and the natural resources of their home planet and system were beginning to dwindle, hence the need for a colonization project. We also hear of Ballas's hatred for the sentients, even in his defection recordings to Hunhow, where he calls the sentients vile blasphemies. It seems he had extreme foresight when it came to predicting what would happen at the very beginning of the sentient project. I once again quote from the Detron crew member's synthesis. "They opened the chamber door, just in time for me to see it happen, the Artmedian, erupting into a flash, jade-light and blinding. I knew her. She was the greatest scholar of genetics who ever lived, except now she was nothing but mist and gore." We can see from this quote that his behaviour in this court case shows his power even amongst other executors. He is clearly one of the most prominent in this trial, although eventually he would lose the case due to the overwhelming desire to move out of their home system, and the Sentient Project would get the green light. As seen by these brutal executions, Ballas was not averse to cruelty at all. This is once again evidenced by his treatment of Cephalon Ordis, our guardian, who was once a man known as Orden Karis. You can learn of this tale and Ordis's creation through hidden spots in codex fragments. But to surmise, Orden Karis was a mercenary warrior who, haunted by his actions in battle, attempted to kill as many Orokin as he could possibly do. During this confrontation, he was mortally wounded, but Ballas, instead of letting him die, he punishes him by having his mind transferred and transformed into a computer, his memories altered to serve the Tenno, and therefore he is birthed as Cephalon Ordis, an extremely cruel fate that is worse than death. However, it is fair to say that the Orokin ruling class as a whole were fairly cruel. We can see this from their towers in the void, which still remain. These towers turn living people into attack drones by hijacking their minds. In the War Within, we learn that some Orokin extended their long lives through the process known as continuity. We find a forum, or a floor, where the Orokin would come and bid on beautiful young bodies that they would hijack and transfer their consciousness into, erasing the person whose body it had actually been. Ballas, although very inhuman, was not without human flaws. He is very clearly a narcissist. In the Chimera prologue, he has been disfigured and mutilated by his sentient resurrection, and he laments about the loss of his beautiful form. Cruel though he was clearly very intelligent, for what he had predicted came to pass when the Sentients returned from Tau and attacked the Orokin Empire. In his Vitruvian recordings to Hunhao, we hear from Ballas' own words why he believes they attacked after finding Tau. He says, "But when you arrived at that distant world, you knew that in time we would bring ruin to it as well. They therefore attacked because the Sentients saw the Empire causing the death of all things, even this new world that they had been sent to colonise on behalf of the Empire." Ballas seems to have fallen for another human characteristic, and that is love. It is implied to us that he was the lover of Margulis, the original mother figure and protector of the Tenno. During the second Dream Quest, we get flashbacks of Margulis' dealing with the Tenno and the Orokin. In short, it was she who would care for them as a mother figure after they returned from the 10-0 accident. The rest of the Orokin saw them as uncontrolled monstrosities, mutations, but she saw their potential, and it was she who induced their second dream, so that they might control their powers and gain a measure of peace. She calls out her fellow Orokin for wanting to dispose of the Tenno. She says,
"So shame on you, you Orokin! So perfect on the outside, but you're rotted through and through!"
Ultimately, her protection of these Tenno would mean her falling foul of the Orokin ruling class. She was sentenced to death in the same court that Ballas presided over for the crime of apostasy, the executors seeing these children as heresy. We hear Ballas pleading with her, "Why, Margulis? Why risk death for these devils?" She tells them that they will not hurt anyone, and that they have the potential to save the Empire. She asks him to free her from the imprisonment, but ultimately he does nothing, and she concludes that he is no different from the others.
You lied to me, Ballas. You're no different than the rest of them.
Evidently, Ballas' inaction leads to the death of his lover. He clearly feels he can't do anything, and he doesn't really understand why she is sacrificing her life for what he considers to be devils. This would explain Ballas' hatred for the Tenno, why he resents us. He always calls us devil, unholy. We are the main reasons that his lover went to her death. He most likely sees it as her choosing us over him. Later, after her death, it would be Ballas who would pick up her project where she left off, no doubt as a result of losing the war with the Sentients. In his Vitruvian recording, he tells us that he was the one who created the Warframes after they had tried everything, for their war machines had been turned against them by the Sentients, and the infested had failed. He made the Warframes out of people who were volunteers or not. He infected them with the infestation, the Helminth, and he created these biodrones known as Warframes. However, again, they backfired. But it would be him to realise the potential of the Tenno in regards to this project, for we hear him talking to another executor of transference in the second Dream Quest. And this is the first hint that we get chronologically that Ballas was involved in the Warframe project. Indeed, the sacrifice goes into this more detail and tells us that he was the lead in the Warframe project, and he was the one that developed them. In a lot of ways, Ballas is the architect of everything that has come to pass, and it was his idea to let us, the Tenno, channel our power through the Warframe. Once again, Ballas shows his ruthlessness in his managing of this project. He said that he took people volunteers or not, and that means that he put people against their will into this project. And indeed, in the case of one Dax soldier who had been spying on him, Umbra, he actually took sadistic pleasure in the pain the man experienced whilst transforming into a Warframe, and eventually would make this Warframe kill his own son. The decision to have Margulis killed would, in time, haunt him, and indeed his regret for his role in her execution is actually one of his main motivators by the time that we meet him. In this sacrifice, we learn that after developing the Warframes, he betrayed his own creations and his empire to the sentients by passing on the secret of the Tenno over to Hunhow himself. He sounds so bitter in these recordings. The memories of Umbra tell us why.
How could I betray my own kind? But you have never had to sacrifice your love for faith. Imagine to live forever with only one memory. Seeing the one you love die.
In time, he began to resent his own kind for, quote, making him kill the one he loved. His love for Margulis and his distress over his own role in her death makes him defect to a side which he considers to be heretical. And this information is actually what leads to the downfall of the Orokin Empire. Later, in the chronology of his story, in the Apostasy prologue, we find that Ballas is still alive after all this time, and he sees the Lotus as Margulis, most likely as some desperate attempt to have some aspect of his lover. Using some methods that we are not quite sure of, maybe some sentient trickery, he convinces the Lotus that she is Margulis, and she goes with him, abandoning her duties as the Lotus. In the sacrifice quest, we learn that Ballas is working with his own enemies, the sentients, most likely being given refuge by them after his old world defection. The Lotus is with him, but she has returned to her sentient state. It seems like the sentients use Ballas to trick the Lotus and bring Natah back into the fold. He most likely agreed to this due to his desperation to have Margulis back. We get confirmation of this in the Chimera prologue when we see Ballas in his altered state. He states, "We saw what we wanted, those devils and I, a lover, a mother." This indeed confirms that he had hoped to recover some of his former lover from the Lotus personality. From Umbra's memories, we see further evidence of his cruelty, as mentioned before, how he took people involuntarily to become Warframes. As the architect of the main weapon against the sentient, he alerts Hunhow to the information, their secrets. Then Hunhow sent Natah to infiltrate the Orokin, and she began manipulating the Tenno. Hunhow would then allow a fake victory by being destroyed by the Tenno, with the understanding that his daughter, Natah, would then use the Tenno to destroy all the Orokin, before letting the Tenno destroy themselves. The rest is history, and in part Ballas is the architect of all of these deceptions and plots that lead to the current storyline. However, in the end, Ballas's multiple betrayals catch up with him, making too many powerful enemies. Both ourselves and Umbra have a bone to pick with him, and together we end him with a sword through the stomach. Our alliance is more powerful than Ballas's control through the transferent bolt, and Umbra breaks free. Ballas has quite an ignoble end for such an influential and charismatic character. His final part in this story, as of now, is when we meet him in the Chimera prologue. He is broken and pathetic. His life has been saved by Natah, but he has essentially been turned into a sentient Orokin hybrid, and it appears that Natah can even see through his eyes. He gives us plenty of interesting dialogue in this meeting. It basically comes down to him changing his allegiance because of the fact he has been reduced to a sentient slave. For a narcissist such as Ballas, this is a terrible blow. Not only does he lament the loss of his beautiful body and beautiful appearance, but he is also not used to being in power, in control. Arguably, up to this point, he was one of the most powerful people in the entire galaxy. Now he is nothing more than a sentient puppet. As a result, he actually helps us. This is a clear sign of how badly his ego has been affected. He hates us. He hates the Tenno. And for him to actually help us over the sentience shows how broken he is by being reduced a slave. He gives us the paracesis, the sentience layer, maybe something he had this whole time in case things went wrong. This is an offering in the hopes we can end his shame and destroy those responsible for his current indenturement. For as we hear from his own mouth, he does not even consider this to be life. So there we go, guys, that's my quite quick look at the history of this pretty deep and influential character. For me, there's not actually a more influential character in this game. Closest to that is Natah, but honestly Ballas has been kind of the centre of the web for a long time. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on Ballas in the comments below. Thanks, guys.